Okay, and do y'all see the,
It says it's recording on my end.
it's recording? Okay, cool. Let me screen share. This is the things that I do not love about being forced to be in the house all the time. I love to be in person, but I really want to honor y'all and thank y'all for meeting, for coming and taking the time out to join us today. So if you are just now joining us, this is a discussion and a partnership between Black Lives Matter New Haven and the New Haven Pride Center. And this discussion and Q&A is centering around Black queer feminism and all the many aspects that make up those beautiful intersections of Black queer feminism. And today our panelists are Kamora Harrington, and she joins us from Hartford. She is the creator of Kamora's Cultural Corner. You can get in touch with her through her email and her, as well as her, the page for Cultural Corner, Kamora's Cultural Corner, and I'll reshare that information with y'all at the end of the discussion. So if you want to get any links, or if you want to email anyone directly, if you want to book anyone, or you want to buy anything, or you want to just get further discussion and clarity on some things that happened today, or topics we covered during the panel and discussion, you can reach out to each and every one of these amazing people individually. We are also joined by Farron Harvey, who is the owner and creator of Fractal Change. We're the interpersonal and systemic meet. And I really think that's beautiful. I have like a question about that later. I would love for you to expound, even maybe when y'all introduce yourselves, Farron, on how did you come up with such a beautiful mission or vision behind your work. And we are also joined by Ashleigh Huckabey from New Haven. Oh, I forgot, I'm gonna go back, excuse me. Farron is from Bridgeport. And we are also joined by Ashleigh Huckabey of New Haven. She is also a member of Black Lives Matter New Haven. She is also creative director and content creator and owner and empath behind Empath Vintage. And you may have heard of the clothing swaps, the Love clothing swaps that have been happening around New Haven and the surrounding areas. So, and my name is Allah. I am also from Black Lives Matter New Haven. I am the youth program coordinator at New Haven Pride Center. I'm really excited to be here with y'all today. So I wanna give an honor to our panelists and ask, actually, before I do that, I want to share with y'all the creative and the artists behind this beautiful artwork that you are seeing that's actually on display in New Haven Pride Center's art show right now. You can't go and see it in person, but you can go to New Haven Pride Center on our Facebook page and on our website and look at the virtual tour. The artist is J. Mark Renee. This actual painting that you're looking at is called Intense Vibes, again by J. Mark Renee, who is a Black artist. He has done some work in another art show that Black Lives Matter and the Pride Center and Nasty Women did together, I believe last year, which was Obias and Isms. So this panel and discussion that y'all are joining us in is a continuation of the work that Black Lives Matter and New Haven Pride Center have been doing. So I want to start with Kamora. If you can please just give a brief introduction of yourself, clear up anything that I might have mispronounced, or anything else. And if you wouldn't mind by starting to share your pronouns and again, your name and where you're from.
Okay, hello, beautiful humans. My name is Kamora Harrington. She, her, primarily, most of the time. I'm from Hartford, Connecticut. I am firmly from Hartford, Connecticut, born, raised, left for a decade, because this is home. Let's see, I am old school dyke or lesbian. I'm 48 years old, if that gives you some time context on what that word is. So queer is a wonderful word, and it's a word that I stepped into through work because it's not a word that anyone in my generation was using for themselves. That's a word that's been incorporated and come back. And I say that because I call myself a feminist, and I'm kind of excited about this conversation because I know that I'll get to talk about Barbara Smith, that lesbian Barbara Smith, who made it clear that words matter. And you can be a womanist if you want, and that's a great thing, but don't allow them to steal feminists and don't allow them to feel feminism as they stole and everything else. So if that gives you an idea of who I am and where I come from and how I come. So I'm the founder and visionary of Kamora's Cultural Corner, and we come from a Black, queer, Afrocentric perspective, unapologetically all the time. This offends many folks. And again, so one of the things I'm looking forward to having in this conversation is there's absolutely nothing divisive about that. As a Black woman, I will tell you that we are the original. We can go deep on that. But more importantly, and definitely as queer and gay folks in this society, the spaces that we've been given, we created them to begin with, but then they turned them into white, Eurocentric spaces where we created the space and then we were no longer allowed in that space. So I very loudly and very unapologetically, we are Black, we are queer, we are Afrocentric. We've got space for white folks to put themselves inside of our space and enjoy space with us. And it's interesting seeing who will and won't do that. And it makes me wonder about those white heterosexual or white Eurocentric spaces where they said there was space for us and never bothered to say those were exclusionary. So you're dealing with someone who considers herself right in the middle of old school gays and new school queers. And I love dwelling in that middle place. That's me.
Thank you. And next, Farron, would you please introduce yourself for everyone that is on the call? And again, please start with your pronouns and clear up anything that I might have mispronounced or anything like that.
Yes, thank you for inviting me into this space, Orisha. Again, my name is Farron. My pronouns are she and they. I think Orisha got my bio from my website pretty spot on. The work that I do in all aspects of my life is kind of just inspired about that phrase where the interpersonal and the systemic meet. I also just like to say it's kind of what Audre Lorde talked about, where the personal is political, the political is personal. I often just think that is one of the ways in which I carry this lens of being a queer Black feminist and how I see the world is through that lens of it being both personal and political, wearing like our own stuff meets and like the systemic stuff meets, and looking at those intersections.
Wow, that was beautiful, Farron. Thank you. And Ashleigh, would you please introduce yourself and remind everyone of what your pronouns are?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Beautiful people. My name is Ashleigh Huckabey, and my pronouns are she and they. And I am also born and raised from NewHaven. Am I echoing?
Wait, Sun has to mute herself. Okay. I'm sorry, Ashleigh, go ahead.
Should I start over? Okay. Okay, so again, my name is Ashleigh Huckabey. My pronoun.
Oh,
no. Am I good? Okay,
yeah.
from NewHaven, born and raised, and also grew up in Hamden. I am the creative director and founder of Empath Vintage. I am a fashion lover. I resell vintage clothing fill people's needs and to also make them feel good about themselves internally. And that is one of my life's missions, is to, as a queer woman, as a queer feminist woman, as a Black woman, to provide a service where we can feel good on the inside while looking great on the outside. Also a member of Black Lives Matter NewHaven, where I do a lot of work in the community involving, just uplifting, supporting those who are in need, being a big sister to those who need one, being an heir, or, just being that healer that I naturally am as a Black queer feminist to my city and to the surrounding cities as well. And Ala did mention my love swaps. I also do host pop-up shops and clothing swaps in the area to remind the community that environmentalism is important, and that we must, keep that wealth that we have in our communities, and continue to show the youth that, we can do all that we can creatively, politically, to make sure that our communities are good. And thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. We honor y'all and thank y'all for joining in today. There we go. So I want to start by just getting it out there and asking each one of y'all. And I'll start with you, Ashleigh, because you were the last person talking. What is your personal definition of Black queer feminism? And furthermore, like, how is this related to your intersectionalities? But most importantly, what is your personal definition of Black queer feminism?
Well, from my personal definition, it's life. It's who I am. It's a way of life. It's the way I put forth everything that I am as a Black queer woman. So being someone who's liberated, being someone who's proud to be Black, but also represent a community that doesn't get the representation that we should and the recognition that we should as queer women and as queer feminists. To me, it's making sure that our voices are heard as Black artists, Black queer women, supporting each other, no matter what background, race, religion, social level, economical level, we all have one voice. And being a Black queer woman feminist, I am a healer. We are healers, and we have experienced trauma. And for me, naturally, that's what being a Black queer woman feminist represents. It's liberation first. It's not pretty. It's not something that we chose. Well, we did choose. We absolutely chose this path, but it's not something that many people understand. And I think that's why we're here, to make sure that our voices are heard and that we have a powerful place in society.
Thank you, Ashleigh. And again, the same question for Kamora. What is your personal definition of Black queer feminism?
One thing I've got to reiterate a whole lot of what I just heard, because it's my way of being. It's just what I've got. So it's the lens and the view that I bring, no matter what. It's what's going to have to come into the room when I come into the room. And I think in many ways, it's Black queer feminism is, if you are Black, if you are queer, if you are woman identified, feminine identified, then you've had so much crap coming at you that's just the BS, that the way you think and the way that you approach stuff just moves past all that BS very, very quickly. So and again, I preference myself and my identities a lot, but I think that Black queer feminism is a truth and gives us all a starting place where we can start from truth rather than any place of ambiguity and not understanding. It just gives us we're here, we're real, let's move forward and do some stuff.
Thank you. Farron, what's your personal definition of Black queer feminism?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. When I think about that, it makes me think of both the lived experience and me having the privilege of, going to an institute, a higher education, and studying Black queer feminism. It makes me think about the lived experience that both Kamora and Ashleigh already named, around this is who I am, and this is who I'm always going to be, and this is who I be in this space always. And also, I think the thing that really gets really clear about it is understanding real fast around, again, I feel like I'm just quoting Octavia, Audre Lorde, but like realizing that like I'm not free until everyone is free, even, no matter how different their like oppression looks from me. And so I think what being a Black queer feminist has done for me is, even in moments where I'm like, I don't get it, I don't understand why this issue matters, I automatically also understand how this issue, if it's impacting someone who I'm saying I'm committed to, needs to get addressed if we're both about to get free. Because if they're not feeling seen and heard, then like, it's just not gonna work. And so for me, a Black queer feminist, for me, it just really means like showing up in solidarity and in partnership with people when their shit looks different from mine. And also it's being very clear that what makes someone a Black queer feminist is that they understand that capitalism is at the root of all of this and is inherently the thing that kills us all. Right? Whether you are a Black trans person overseas, whether you are a Black poor person, we all understand that at the root of it is capitalism that is causing our oppression, that then interacts with racism, that interacts with sexism, right? And misogyny and all of these things. And so I think what's really just important is naming being a Black queer feminist is that means you're also anti-capitalist by default.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you, Farron. Because I specifically asked y'all definition before I did my moderators, like, this is the definition I found. Because I believe in going to the people of the lived experience and people of the global majority as my first primary sources. And so, to quote Charlene Carruthers, who I absolutely love, is an amazing young Black queer feminist. Black Queer Feminism, or BQF, is a framework that seeks to liberate all oppressed people by dismantling the systems that marginalize all people. BQF lens takes a pointed stance at dismantling capitalism, racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, queerphobia, biphobia, and patriarchy simultaneously. And that goes directly into my need to, before we go to the future, to always go back to the past and go back to remembering. And so after Patrick came to me and asked me to vision around a Black queer feminist panel, like, what is that discussion? Like, what are we gonna do? Of course, I'm excited. And I go to remembering my history. And for me, I went to the Combahee River Collective, because for me, that was one of the oldest, but yet I can still find all the research everyone, all these people, I can find the pictures of a group of Black people who were not just women, were not just lesbian, and who in our past directly organized around being Black feminists. And so I just want to read just a portion of the statement and ground ourselves in the Combahee River Collective and know that each and all of us come from we stand on the shoulders of these people that created this. And so part of the Combahee River Collective statement is, the most general statement of our politics at the present time will be that we are actively committed to struggling against racial, sexual, heterosexual, and class oppression, and see as our particular task the development of integrated analysis and practice based upon the fact that the major systems of oppression are interlocking. And it's so much more, and it's so beautiful. And I share the links for all of that. And some of us have probably read it and are connected to that Combahee River Collective already. And so that brings me to the whole premise of intersectionality. And I would ask Farron, since you was talking last, that's my tactic for moderation. The person who was talking last got to answer the question again, FYI. So that's how you'll know if you're coming up next at each new topic. Farron, I would ask you how, and y'all kind of touched on it, but I would like you to identify how has your intersectionality allowed you, along with Black queer feminist lens, how has that allowed you to recognize your power? And how do you use this power that you recognize to thrive, not just survive? Like, we know Black queer people, Black people, queer people, we know how to survive, but how do you use your super power of who you are as a person? And again, this is for everyone, so y'all start thinking about your answer. How do you use your Black queer feminism to, again, recognize your power and your intersectionality, and how do you use that to thrive?
You know, that's a really interesting question, because I think the first thing that's coming to my mind is like, well, what are my everyday like lived experiences or the things that I'm struggling with? And so one of those things are like secure housing, secure, stable, affordable housing for myself and my like nuclear family and extended family. And I'm like, oh, if I'm also having these things around housing, or I'm trying to figure out like how to own the land in a capitalist society, when in actuality we shouldn't be owning land, but that is the state of the condition, then that means also other Black people are also having this issue. And so how I show up in that is just bringing it to the people, like, yo, this is what I'm going through. This is my experience. Like, can we do something about this, or what do you think? And so I think the way that I've been able, my superpower is like galvanizing folks to have these conversations around like, how do we come together to move from a place of surviving to thriving? So if the issue is housing, then like, what are ways of remembering? And I want to name remembering, because I think our ancestors as Black people were smart as fuck. And like had this, like they did intergenerational housing. We all lived in the same house, and we were able to make it work, right? Like, we had land and build like tiny houses on those lands, or like those, you know, in-laws houses. We were already doing that, but then at some point we were told that's not the way, and we stopped doing those things. And so I say that to say, I think a lot of my superpower comes from like bringing us together and talking about what it is, the issue, and trying to remember old ways of being that will actually still be relevant, and making sure that we are able to go from a place of surviving and living paycheck to paycheck to being a bit more expansive, and like trying to figure out if this is this like expansive and moving us towards this idea of freedom and liberation. You're muted.
That's also your superpower, is looking out for your community. Thank you, Farron. And again, so who did I throw under the bus last time? Let's just go with you, Ashleigh, because it's looking like you didn't want to answer that question. So, right? I know.
No, I wanted to. I was ready. I was like, okay, she's gonna make me go last, so then I'm gonna be prepared to go first. The next time I was already like putting it out in my head, like, how's this gonna go? So I'm ready.
Good. And so would you like me to re-ask the question?
Yes, please.
Okay. How do you use your intersectionality and as well as your Black queer feminist lens to recognize your power And then how do you use that power to thrive, not just survive, but
Great question once again. And, you know, bouncing off of, picking off of Farron, you know, I feel as if being a voice and being able to bring people together and really understand the power we have as Black people, and then also being able to be a voice for Black women and Black queer women, and make them understand and make us all understand and overstand the power we have and the effects we can have on our community. Now, I will say my superpower is the empathy and the vulnerability that I have when it comes to communicating with those who are either like me, queer women, or even I find myself relating a lot to, I would say, Black men who don't understand Black queer women in our place in society and our voice. You know, growing up and really coming into my queerness, I would say around 19, 20, a little bit later, it was something that was a little bit of a struggle, especially being in church, you know, being in a Baptist church. I realized I had to have a different voice. I had to have a thicker skin, be stronger if I wanted to be myself and encourage other, you know, women around me to be themselves. And so being a Black queer woman, I realized I had a triple threat against me. I wasn't only a woman, I was Black and I was queer. And so that to me was my superpower alone, that other people saw as something that, you know, either was a sin or something that was negative. I used it as something that could be powerful and that could change and make an impact on my community.
Thank you, Ashleigh. Not Farron, Ashleigh. And so Kamora, I'm coming to you next. Do you want me to repeat the question or you got it?
I think I've got it. I've been thinking for a little bit over here. And so how do I use my intersectionality? There's that beautiful place where, I don't know, it just is what it is. But from being a young woman who, if you had met me when I was 20, I did try to play the respectable game. I did try to act right. And at one point I was quoted and I used my beautiful, boy, was I articulate as fuck, right? Sorry. But I spoke the way I was supposed to. And then the quote that ended up being taken put me in some African-American vernacular because it made people feel much more comfortable. And that was upsetting and didn't feel good until someone explained to me that Sojourner Truth never said, "Ain't I a woman?" She said, "I am too a woman." However, the good white progressive, or we'll say the good white suffragist who was transcribing this, figured that it would have a stronger impact if she made her sound like a Black woman and stole her voice completely, right? And so as a human being who comes from Black, queer, all of the intersections, and knowing that those are going to be used against me, I just very early on learned how to walk into a room and go, yeah, and what? Yeah, and what? So walking into queer space where we were all supposed to leave our ethnicity at the door in order to come into this LGB whatever community, and making it clear, no, my messy Black lady is going to be in here, and going into Black space and saying, but I'm a big old dyke and she needs to be here as well. But pushing in ways where showing up is that you do get the hits, but then you also get a space where you have a lot more space. I can tell you that there's a lot of racist crap that people have no problem saying in mixed company, a lot of homophobic crap that people have no problem saying in mixed company that they will never say in front of me. All of those nice, beautiful ways that people try to use our identities to shut us down. Yeah, I'm broke. My car breaks down a lot. That's what happens because I'm broke. You're not going to use that against me. And I say that, so what is my superpower? Is that I can take all of that and share it with people so that they can identify their superpowers. So very recently, there was a young Black trans woman who was in a big old gay meeting, and she was the only person of color, and she was the only trans in there. And the good white people knew that they needed to shut her up. And so when she brought up issues of access, and issues of access that would definitely affect people from a different socioeconomic and basically made it quite clear, okay, so while you brought in a truth that makes us all uncomfortable, we're gonna shut you up by using your poorness against you because we all know that no one can admit to being poor. And we've allowed you into this space. And then when she and I spoke about it afterwards, I identified that immediately and just took her to a place of, you are so much better than them. Because think about this for 1 second. You're in a room filled with well-educated white gay men who made it clear that they own the conversation. They said some stuff, they were wrong. You said some stuff, you were right. And how did they shut you down? With their dollars. By proving that they have more dollars than you do, you won. And that's how I use this as a superpower, because all of these identities that we have, Kimberly Crenshaw did a wonderful job. Who was it? Jillian Nelson. There's a whole bunch of folks who, when the term intersectionality popped up, it was like 87, 88, we were all happy that there was a word, but it was something that we've been working in and operating in already anyways, because you've got absolutely no choice. So the way it is a superpower, and the way I'm loving watching younger folks make it a superpower is, my generation did a great job of showing up in Black space, and yeah, I'm queer, but we don't really talk about that here because that's respectful here, and showing up in gay space as in, yeah, I'm Black, but we don't really talk about that because that's not really respectful here. We're moving past that, and that's where we all can activate our superpower.
Thank you for that. And so it's time to get into the nitty-gritty of the panel. Those were the easy questions. No. And so I think that very quickly leads me into the next thing about the whole feeling behind kind of showing up and being like, you're not going to use me against me. I'm about to show up and I'm going to just be me, and you're going to rock with it or you're not going to rock with it. But either way, I'm still in this space and you can't push me out. And so that leads me into religion. And Ashleigh, you spoke to it. I know you personally, so I also know that your queerness doesn't allow you to disconnect from not necessarily religion, but having a spirituality and growing up in church and things like that. Those things matter and are a staple for you and most of us. And so at the helm of the Black community is religion. It has been instrumental in the preservation of Black people from enslavement to Jim Crow. It is also inundated with hegemonic patriarchy and anti-gayness. If you don't mind sharing, and you can pass, but anyone, and this is to anyone on a panel, if you don't mind sharing, what's your relationship to religion and or spirituality? Do you have a love-hate relationship with it? In relation to your queerness, especially leading towards religion, because that's a main point and focus where we get the message that queer people are wrong, and the Black community is definitely willed it as a tool against us and why we shouldn't exist. So Kamora, because you know that's my tactic, you're the first to answer this question.
Oh, this is always a hard one on me, just because I really don't think it's someone's faith, someone's belief system is their belief system, right? And we're all born into something, and then if we are lucky for all of the reasons, if we've got the ability, we then go and cobble together what our own true faith and what our own true belief system is, based on what we come from and what we step into and what we live, and what our ultimate truth is. And the Black church has been so important for us in this country. And that's one of those weird, interesting places where I'm right now, I'm in this space with a whole bunch of Black folks, and I'm talking to Black folks on this one. And the church, I gave birth in 1989 and I was 18 years old. The church didn't have space for me at that time, okay? So I was not living up to what a Black woman was supposed to do. I clearly had sex out of wedlock. I clearly went forward and had this baby without a man next to me, and there wasn't space for me there. And there was a time when there was this very real need for that in the church, because that was our community center. So we are queer, we're gay, we've got the gay bar, and that can be problematic. We're Black, this is our community, we've got the Black church, and that can be problematic. And so if we can step back and really think of what the Black church has done for us for generations, even during enslavement, right? So when we think about capitalism and how capitalism hurts us, when we're on the plantation, The person who had just a little bit of status, maybe a melanated overseer, but really the person who was allowed to be the pastor, right? And so the church for us for a very long time has been a place to step into respect and step into a place where you're seen not in the way that the larger community and the larger society sees you and is going to interact with you. So for many reasons, Black church is incredibly important, and it has hurt many of us. So when I talk to queer folks about their relationship with their own personal church, I've got a lot of space. Redeemers AME in Plainville, Connecticut is my family church, and I'll defend that church forever. I'll defend that building. And a lot of the thought that lives within that building doesn't quite have space for me. And I talk about showing up as me all the time. That place, when my family came up here from Opelika, Alabama, that is the church that they founded. That is where they've been forever. That is where my history lies. And I think when we think about us specifically and church, we need to really create a place where there's space there. All of the rules that those Christians like to live by, I'm not really down with. And many of them, one-on-one conversation in my home, one-on-one conversation with someone who I love, I will tear a lot of that stuff down. But I will also step back and understand how it's kept so many of my people going for so long. My own place when it comes to spirituality is taking in a whole lot of this, the idea of what Christianity gives us, but understanding that there's this fear-based thing that I just can't get with. There's no part of me that can get there. And it's that really uncomfortable conversation. My grandmother was an usher. That woman was never called Mrs. Harrington by any white folks. She was offered a lot of respect in her church. And I would never want to take that away, and I would never want to tear that down. But I do think that we, and definitely us, again, this is this place where our superpower is that we've got a different lens. We can examine and discuss and look at how that's helpful and how it's hurtful without getting to a place of being disrespectful. And that really doesn't answer the question, but it begins to step into it. One thing I think a place where we're ready to start having those conversations is how many folks are stepping into African-based religions and African-based spirituality and spiritual practices, where we can have space where we can, if we are not firmly tied to the church, then we can step out of it and look at it with love. Because I can tell you, the numbers of Christians, the number of people I know who consider themselves Christians and go to church, who have a definite hate relationship and just like dislike everything about this organized religion thing, but there's this fear that means that they've got to continue going, they've got to continue being involved in that nonsense. Means that many of us aren't ready to really start examining what our real beliefs are as opposed to what we feel our beliefs are supposed to be.
And no, yes, actually, you did very much answer the question in your own way and what it means to you. You answered it beautifully, actually. So, because you said, like, you know, you'll cuss me out if I come for your church, and also you know that they have some growing edges every now and then, but that's still your church, and that's the answer. I don't think that there's a right or wrong, and the Black community, and coupled with being queer and coupled with being feminist, and then add another intersection on, like maybe a trans identity or a non-binary identity. Each time you add another intersection on, it changes that relationship that people have with the church as well. And so we have to hold that space. And then like you said, and like, I'm not a church practitioner, but I was indoctrinated into church. But I'm not a practitioner of church. I'm a practitioner. I'm a practitioner of spirituality. And so again, I would ask Ashleigh, I'm coming to you. How do you feel about being Black and queer and a feminist and religion or spirituality and those things?
You know, it's been a journey. I think growing up in church, actually being born on Bible study night, as my mom reminds me constantly, and growing up in a Baptist church, you know, going to church a couple days a week, all day on Sunday, you know, choir rehearsal all the time, grandmother still on the trustee board, mom a deacon. Like, it's just, you know, it's my family. It's everyone in my family. But, you know, I feel strong today to know that spirituality has guided me to be who I am today. and to lead me to help others, especially, learning more about African-based religions, as Kamora mentioned, and learning more about Oshun and our Orishas, and learning more about Buddhist practices and other religions and other cultures. I realized like a lot of it is the spirituality is in us. We are gods. We are the goddesses. We are, what that fear factor was Kamora mentioned. We fear God, and that's the only person, that's the only man we share, but that we fear. But that was hard for me as a Black queer woman to really listen to and obey and practice growing up, because for me, if anything, my God is a woman. It's the creator. It's Mother Earth. And so having that opinion was very difficult because it was different than my family. Even to this day, everything that I've done has been based off of me not praying to God anymore, me not going to church, anything that was negative that happened in my life, me being homeless, or me losing a job in the past, or, me dealing with, learning my superpowers and understanding the differences between mental health and just being extremely spiritual and powerful and really owning that. And I had to step away from the church. I respect the church. I respect the leaders of the church. I even respect the men who don't respect us as Black queer women and don't support us. I even respect them because they have, I feel a little sorry for them, because I feel like as a Black queer woman, the power that we have is that we can authentically be ourselves in all spaces. And nothing or no one's thoughts or religions or practices or a book is going to make us feel any different. We're like a rainbow, so we're going to come in all flavors, all forms, and you can't categorize us, you can't box us into a specific religion. And I love that about being a Black queer woman is that I could control that about my life. I don't have to go to church every Sunday and pay my tithes, and that's how I'm going to get into heaven. I know that if I meditate and I eat correctly and I uplift my community and I, go back to the land and learn how our natural resources, like that is to me spirituality and how we can uplift our people as Black queer women.
Thank you. I'm taking notes and pulling stuff out later on. And before I go and ask you, Farron, to answer this question, we have some new people that joined us. And so I also just want to remind y'all, as the discussion is happening, anyone in the audience, if you have some things that you want to share, or you have a question that you really want to ask, please put it in the chat and direct it to me. And during the question and answer portion of this discussion, we will get to your question in the order that it's posted to me. So I encourage you, don't wait and ask them now. Okay, thank you, Farron. Sorry for that interruption. I just wanted to share that information out with everyone. Did you need me to re-ask the question, or you got it? Re-asked? Okay. How do you hold the space of the lens of being a Black queer feminist along with being a Black queer person? How does that affect your relationship with religion? Is it a love-hate relationship? Is it more difficult? What does that look like for you?
Yes. I think it's a bit nuanced and complicated. I like to tell people that my family are fake Christians, in the sense that like we would go only on holidays, and it was more so my grandmothers who really held on to that, like praying every day, having their Bible by their bedstands. And as I got older, the moment I was able to, as a kid, not go anymore, I chose not to go. And now that I'm older, I actually have a bit more compassion. Actually, I just saw that my Mac is gonna die, so you might just see me doing some movements to plug it in. But I say that to say, I think white people, white supremacy, we can't talk about faith without talking about like white supremacy. I think our ancestors used like Christianity as a form of resistance, as a form of protection, as a way to come. Like the only way that some white folks were even willing to teach Black people to read was so that they could learn the word, right? Black people organized in a church. A lot of the civil rights that happened in the church. Black women were able to galvanize and have leadership roles. I think Kamora kind of hinted to that earlier. And in the vein or in the name of church, that's where people were able to experience more respect, right? And kind of have some air quote power. And I also think that because there's such a suppression, you also saw a buildup in the church around like abuse and around the abuse of power. If you can't show power or like what you bring to the table, but only in this one space, and you have everyone doing that, right, there's going to be some conflict and some interest, conflict of interest that happens there. And so I say that to say, for me, my experience when I was younger, I think was like the idea that you're supposed to be fearful of God. But then I realized that was actually like white people's like influence and like their understanding of what it means to have someone be over you, right? When we talk about organizing, we have people who are over, working with, and power under, right? And so I say that to say, I think that comes up in these like, I think that fear of, you have to be fearful of God, or God is a fearful being or entity, is actually rooted in white supremacy and ways in which like people further oppress people and suppress their desires. And so as I've been doing my own work, I'm actually really, grateful that my ancestors were able to find solace and like was able to, find moments of happiness and like freedom, and found a faith that really just like tethered them here. Because when I think about being Black, my grandmother is from Canton, Alabama. My other, great grandparents are from Jacksonville, Florida. I cannot imagine. I have anxiety now in 2020 with the amount of white supremacy, the flare-ups that's happening with this like, presidency and them tweeting for white folks to riot, right? Like I have anxiety now. I can't imagine what it was like in 1930, 1940, 1950 to be Black, to be woman, and also this desire of wanting more for your lineage. And so I say that to say, for me, it no longer like conflicts. There's no longer a conflict there for me. I think it's just genuinely an understanding around how this religion actually allowed my ancestors to get from point A to maybe even point D, right? Like they've been able to come along by having this faith, this undenying, unwavering faith that it gets better. And also not only does it get better here, or I'm making sacrifices so my kids and my grandkids don't have to, but so that in the afterlife, I can also live this rewarding and fulfilling life. And so I say that to say, being queer when I was younger, maybe, but being now, it actually just feels like it's hand in hand, having a faith and being Black, queer, working class, poor, and committed to a better world or a new world. You need hope. I find myself more than ever singing Negro spirituals, from, busting out with some melodies from heaven to some stumping music, because you need that in order to release some of the pain, the sorrow, and anxiety that this current society that is rooted in white supremacy and capitalism and like, misogyny and sexism and homophobia. I think I cannot separate myself from Christianity eternally, like forever, because used. And so for me, it feels like if that is a tool that I could like use to communicate with my ancestor, if I do not acknowledge that tool, then I'm actually not acknowledging my ancestor. I could have a different relationship with it, but inherently me not acknowledging how Christianity was like a place where people were able to get some respite and was able to like organize and was able to out here to change and truly believe in the good of people. And also, right, like I think with anything with Black folks, Christianity is just not Christianity. I think Black folks, we try to sneak our traditions, our Afro traditions into it. My grandmother, who was a faithful Christian, who still is every day, humming some type of song. The moment you tell her you had a dream, she's pulling out her dream book. The moment you tell her about a particular vegetable or a number, it means something. That is not no Christianity. That is some ancient knowledge that's like left over from this lineage. And so as a queer person, I think being Black, being queer, being gender nonconforming, being born AFAB, assigned female at birth, really at the crux of it all, and I'll shut up because I feel like I'm trying to do a mini sermon and nobody asked for that, is you need faith, or you need something to believe in, because this world is so harsh, and it's no longer feel like they're this tumultuous relationship. Now more than ever, I pull on those, on that spirituality, that relationship, because I think in part, my ancestors hear that ring a bit strongly.
Thank you, Farron. And Kamora actually wanted to share more on this, so please share what.
Oh, I wanted to co-sign and jump on and just say, so going back to that beautiful space of superpowers, because as I was listening to you speak, Farron, so first off, when you talked about the church is not all Christian, Dream Books is the first place I went to in my head. If you could, like, again, being a child and listening to the old pastor and my grandmother discuss dreams and pull the dream book out and argue it, it's like, yeah, that was it. But then the superpower of there needs to be a word, and what is the word that combines empathy and wisdom? Because that is something that we Black women friggin' have in spades. And you heard exactly how I just said that, we've got it in spades. And we use it beautifully. So listening to, well, we've got to think about how our foremothers found solace here and how it took care of them and all this good stuff. So us as Black folks, we are collective, and we're empathetic for all of the reasons that we are and many of the reasons that we can't name, but that's who we are. So as we're thinking about what we need to do and how we need to move forward, we're definitely looking at over our shoulder at what came before us. And what came before us, there was a lot of problematic stuff that came before us, but that problematic stuff for us, because we've got that beautiful wisdom and empathy thing, we don't just go throw it all away. We say, well, my foremothers had to whatever, and because of the times and because of this and circumstances and all these awful things that they did had to have happened at that time, and where's the good that I can take from that to then go build something moving forward. Again, I speak in terms of Black and white all the time. We can discuss what my definition of white is, but that white, rugged individual, look at me do this all myself, creates a place where they are going to continue to, no matter what it is that they create, it's going to be created and flawed, and it's going to be flawed from the get-go, because they can't look at what came behind them and then use that beautiful wisdom and empathy to separate what they need to bring forward and what they need to leave and what they need to build from and what they need to not do to not create the same problems. So what is our superpower? That beautiful part of our soul that comes with us that doesn't.
Can I just add to that? Oh, no, I see Ashleigh. I see you about to mute yourself. Go ahead, Ashleigh.
No, go ahead and add to it. I had something else to bring up that I didn't bring up last time regarding relationships, representation in religion. So you continue, because if you're picking it off of Kamora, go ahead.
Okay. I think the last thing that I'll add also is, in this day and age where we're talking about transformative justice, restorative justice, I'm like, oh, that's cute, but what we're talking about is grace. Oh, what we're talking about is forgiveness, right? Like my grandmother always talking about, you got to have grace for yourself, baby. Are you giving yourself grace? Are you being compassionate, baby? You got to just give them grace, right? And so when I hear these like words of like transformative justice and restorative justice, I also think of how, in part, how that relates to the spiritual aspect of doing your work, your own healing, because we're human, and so often we have to extend grace to ourselves for not knowing what we didn't know, for knowing what we do know and still make decisions that we later might beat ourselves up about, and also how do we extend grace to others. And so I say that to say, I think also as someone who is queer, who is Black, you know, and all of these other identities, I feel like spirituality is grace, which is now dubbed as like, you know, it's doing the work, healing, right? That's where the grace comes in. You can't give grace if you haven't done the work. And so also just saying like that intersectionality, we might call it something else, but it's always been there. That nothing is ever new. It's always been there, right? It just gets rebranded and repackaged. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to add to it some of the experiences I had as a Black queer woman in church. I guess I just want to put a question out there for our other two panelists, and including you, Ala, like how has it been for everyone experiencing their relationships or even dating when it comes to being in church, or explaining to your grandmother Farron that you are a queer woman who, you know, dates other queer women? And so for me, I know that it's not listened to, it's not really acknowledged. It's, oh baby, I love you, God's gonna love you and take care of you. But I know that is something that doesn't get discussed. And to me, I think that's a huge disconnect in a generation, especially between other Black women who aren't queer, that could, you know, use our insight, and we can use their insight and support. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Y'all all know I have an answer. So, but with someone else, Kamora, would you like to answer that?
Well, my answer is ambivalent. So I'm not really sure. I can tell you that I learned really early on that I was allowed to be that way, but I wasn't allowed to be gay or lesbian. And that there was this language that was allowed in the church, because I had an older cousin who was that way. And she was allowed to show up with her partner as long as they both, again, that place of showing up as half of who you are. So as long as they respectfully didn't show up in church as a couple or show up at any church event as a couple, it was okay. They could, everyone knew they lived together, they could come in the same car, but they were allowed to be that way and not a couple. So for me personally, I've run far away from it, and I won't show up in those spaces. Like if I can't come as me, so I can come to a Christmas event, I can come to an Easter dinner, I can show up for these places, but you're not going to allow me to bring all of me, so I won't. And that's an uncomfortable conversation, because I really, whenever I hear folks who are struggling with that, and trying to figure out how to get into it, my only answer is, but why? You know, like if the God in that building can't love your relationship, then why are you in that relationship? Because if that God is your God, then you need to be having another conversation about how to not be yourself in order to please your God. But I really don't get that, how you can separate your soul that way. So the conversations I've had with folks have had to be respectfully disrespectful, as in we can have this conversation, but there's no part of me that can even step into respecting a place that expects you to bring your soul, but leave your love outside.
I'm curious on your.
Yes, and Autumn, I got your question, and we will definitely pose that. And that is one of the follow-up questions, so I'm glad you asked it, Autumn. I would say that I struggle with the Black church specifically because for me, I could probably come with my partner who presents as a masculine presenting lesbian woman. I could probably do that. But I'm from the thought process that like we ain't free unless we all free. So like if I could come with a non-passing trans person as the person I'm dating and still get my aunt to make me a plate and allow us to sit at the table with them, if I can come to Black churches like that, I would probably come with my actual partner that I have. But I have an issue with the possibility politic of like things, and like I know that things are a spectrum, and so when we're dealing with the finite, when we're dealing with women and we're dealing with gay men and gay women, There's everyone has like the story of the choir director being the gayest man in the church. Like everyone knows that, so much so that we live in those stereotypes. But, you know, when the stereotypes around trans people in church, or it has to be like, it says my thing is unstable. Can y'all hear me? With like trans people in the church, it's like parodies of like Medeas and like things like that. And like that, Medea is not identified as trans. Medea is a woman who's just played by a man. So for me, there's not enough of the spectrum of us really welcomed into Black church. And my particular personal relationship with religion is that when I read the Bible as being a studious person who reads, like I have ADD, but I could sit down and read a good story. Once I got through the story as a teenager, really wanting to identify with Jesus and being a teen, I couldn't wait to get to that part of the Bible. It wasn't there for me. Like I wasn't identifying as a queer person. It was just a young Black person who understood that Jesus was Black, because that's the kind of church. I went to AME Zion Church, so we saw Black Jesus on the walls. We didn't see white Jesus. So I didn't think that Jesus was white. I thought that he was Black. So I was looking for that story and I didn't find it in the Bible. And for me, I distrust things that you're telling me is the directive and how I'm supposed to live my life, and I'm supposed to follow Jesus. But the time that I need him most, that story is not there, and I begin to distrust religion there. And then growing up in Catholic school, coupled with going to AME Zion Church on the weekend, I just am very distrustful of like the power and the way that it was wielded against children in like school, and like the ways that power was wielded against us. So I just can't get with religion, but I am very spiritual. You know, I mean, I shifted and changed my whole name based off of the Orishas, like Yoruba, and studying Africa and finding the oldest of the old is what I'm connected into. And two spirit identities are a part of those things, and the oldest of old. And so I could fuck with that because, you know, my trans family are identified in that, and then I feel like that's closer to indigenous studies and spirituality. I feel like are closer to something that I can readily identify with. So I have a super love-hate relationship with the Bible and religion, but I love church. Like my partner had me listen to church music the other day, and I was doing it begrudgingly, mind you, singing the whole songs. So that's my I'll sing the songs, I'll listen to the music, I will rock out with Donnie and all of the rest of them and all the new people I learned about this weekend. But yeah, I struggle with the passability politic and religion.
Yeah, that was like, so the Winans, I love that entire family. I love their music. I don't know if anyone here remembers, but maybe about a decade ago or so, they came out with that song about marriage. Yeah, that song that's like one man, one woman, or whatever it was. And it was interesting because I was in queer progressive space and white folks, and it was just like, who do you think you are to critique me? I'm not going into Puerto Rican space and talking about Celia Cruz, but they really felt as if it was okay to tell me how horrible the Winans were and just how awful their music was because of this one song. It's like, but you don't understand my relationship here. You don't understand about the music at the and it was this weird place of, you need to step back and understand that for us, this has a different meaning. And for us, this is a completely different thing. But I love that, Donnie, our people are problematic, and we can love problematic people. And that's something that they don't understand that we can do.
And before we go on, because this actually leads me to my next thing, but I would like to share what Autumn put in the chat. And she said it, and Autumn, I believe your pronouns are she, but please correct me if your pronouns are not she. Autumn shared with us that they feel like it also depends on the type of church community folks are referring to. Autumn grew up in a Black Episcopal church, and they had queer clergy that were able to do weddings and stuff like that. So they said that there's been some room for queer folks in their lived experience with the Episcopal church, but there's definitely some respectability politic, and yes, Autumn's pronouns are she. And so we know all about that good old respectability politic. And I think if no one had anything burning to share about religion and queerness and stuff, is it okay if we go on? Okay, bet. And actually, so that leads me to my next thing about the media. And the media promotes a stereotypical racialized, gendered, and classist tropes of Blackness, leaving little representation for diversity in our lived experience. And when I say diversity, I mean the good, not diversity, not the trending buzzword funding definition of diversity. I mean like the diversity of Blackness and the diaspora of us and queerness. So the media promotes a stereotypical racialized, gendered, and classist tropes, and leaving little representation for diversity of our lived experience. And I think about stuff like sports and how violent it has been to women and queer folks, and also how accepting of that violence and how we're just supposed to just like mosey on and get through that. And also holding the space that things like sports for Black people. And when I think of feminists as not just having to be women or feminine identified people. I think that I'm really struggling to raise a Black feminist boy. And so when I think of Black feminism, I don't think of the binary. I'm thinking about the inclusion of the spectrum of all genders. And so I say that not for our panelists and probably not for the audience, but for the people who will tune in after. But sports have also, especially for Black people, have been identified as a saving grace for us, for men and women, as far as being able to enter out of things like being in unhealthy situations and having somewhere to go when their homes are not safe, having a way to enter into college because maybe there's no way to pay for it. So, and also stepping into like the whole capitalist regime of making the big money. Sports have a particular relationship with us. And so I think about the media and the sports relationship, and I think, how do you all, what tools rather do you use to combat the media's perception of us? And I think using things like the stereotypes and stuff like violence, and rather the tools that the media uses to further perpetuate those stereotypes. What do you all individually use as tools to combat that in your lived experience? And I think of like the work, and I'll start with y'all, because Farron, you also do work with children and young people. Kamora, you also do work with children and young people and provide spaces. Both of y'all create spaces, and actually you work in the community on a whole. And so I'm thinking from that lens, what do you do in those powers, those ways of being the gatekeepers that you are in our Black community to combat those stereotypes of the media, or that the media helps perpetuate? And I'm sorry if that was wordy, and I will reword it if it's too much. Who was the last person? Y'all tripped me up. So
I'll answer.
Okay, cool.
Mine is just short. It's short and sweet. It's just use my voice. Because I think, I'm not huge on quoting people, but we all know, being silent is worse than not doing anything at all. And so using my voice in any case that I can, and just being able to spread love. Everyone I meet, I spread love. I give love. I am love. I breathe love. And so to me, that's leading by example for either youth or, my peers or other Black women who have a hard time giving love and being love. That's how I combat it. Love is the answer.
Yeah, I talk about it, I name it, I point it out, and I make sure to bring it up as it's come up. So getting ready for this panel right now to have this conversation, I was talking to a woman yesterday who was, in the place of, but we're wominists, and, why are you using this term feminist? And I think the fact that there's a group of Black women right now here in Connecticut calling themselves Black feminists means that we have chosen to ignore the narrative. So know that feminists were around, right? And feminists were around the 80s, and they were doing all their great feminist stuff, and it was all wonderful. And white feminism was doing what white feminism was happening. But you talk about Comey, in 1996, there was the Million Woman March in DC, and that was run by Black feminists, right? And at the same time, there's a huge radical Black feminist conference that happened in Chicago. That was when we started hearing white people talk about being post-feminism. And we started hearing about this need for womanism. So when we found power and when we were actually being seen and we're being quoted and they were writing about us, and all of a sudden we had created this critical mass where Black feminism was a thing, all of a sudden, well, it's not feminism, we're post-feminist, so then go to Obama and we're post-racist. Oh no, we won. You want to know what's happening right now? We've created a place where we can shift and change the narrative because they've decided that what we're doing isn't cool. And how do we know this? Because it's in media everywhere. People here, has anyone ever seen and I always call it Spike Lee, but the movie Pariah about young Black lesbians in love? Beautiful movie, wonderful movie, created by two Black lesbians, and the person who gave them all of their oversight was Spike Lee, who he credits those women with kind of jumping him. If you remember that awful movie he made about the lesbians trying to get pregnant, he credits those two wonderful young undergraduate women in jumping him into understanding what queer politics were. And he said very, very clearly at the time, gay was white. That's what gay was. So some folks have figured out how to take the narrative. When I talk about parenting, when I talk about queer folks parenting, the majority of us who are parenting are female identified, living below the Mason-Dixon line, and Black. But someone else was able to control the media to change and shift their narrative. So I don't believe for a second that I can shift the narrative over at CNN, but I can point it out for the ridiculousness of it so that it doesn't end up hurting my children. We can look at folks, talked about Sojourner Truth. Frederick Douglass figured out how the media manipulates way, way back when he said, no, make sure that they take photos of you. And his advice to every Black revolutionary ever, every Black person who's trying to do any type of progressive work was, make sure they take your photo, because if they do their etching, they're going to turn you into a monkey. That's what they do. They've got to take a photo so they can really see you. And I look at that as that beginning of us controlling the narrative. They're going to own it. They're going to do whatever it is that they're going to do with it. You figure out how to point out the flaws and get the truth in there when you can. But they own it. This is what they do.
So true. And I also think, Farron, are you ready to answer the question?
I would need you to repeat it or
how do you use your Black queer feminist lens to combat the media's perception and the work and the tools that the media uses to identify our narrative of Black queer people and also feminists?
I see. I think in part it is around realizing that our silence will not save us, it will not protect us. And so like saying it, even if it's not cute, even if I'm misunderstood, right? Also referencing Nina Simone in that piece right there, right? Like I am most likely gonna be understood, but I'm gonna say it anyway. And so I think in part that my young folks, or even to like older folks, like, yeah, this is what they want you to think, and this is actually what it is, lead themselves to this different way of understanding or being a relationship. But I also think a huge thing that's happening with media that we're not talking about right now is the ability to act, as in like, yes, you can produce it, but when I go online, I don't have to see anything that I don't want to see. For example, my Instagram, I follow certain people. You know, you could unfollow certain people, you could block, you could restrict. And so I say that to say, I think another way is actually just taking, right, like just actually trying to be intentional about my online presence and what I'm doing online, just like I am with my everyday life. So I'm intentionally following certain folks who are Black, queer, fat-bodied, positive. And so I say it's in two-part. One is like saying what it is, saying what needs to be said, even though there's a chance around like being misunderstood. And also like doing that work with our folks who might, you know, initially believe some of that stuff that's put out. But I think there's this other part around like, and also I get to create this space where Black, fat, who I get to create this other reality. Yeah.
Thank you, Farron. And y'all see me going back and forth because my signal is acting really hanky. So I have my phone on too. So like I'm switching over the audio. I don't want to miss y'all. So it's not that I'm not paying attention or engaged. I just want to be transparent when you see me going back and forth to the sides. And I also am writing down notes. I think y'all did an amazing job of summing up like such a big question. And me personally, my very direct answer to that is always to create the things that I know that I need rather than going towards it. So y'all, every time there's an action, y'all will see me always going live and I'm bringing my 50 million battery packs and sharing the words myself, because as an organizer that has happened, right? Like we have been co-opted by the work. Like I've been at actions that like 1 year ago, we were arguing with this person to stand with us instead of being divisive. And then like the next year, like they're saying the same things we said and not identifying that the work of Black women and Black queer people and Black non-binary people were the people who gave them the language and allowed them to keep going. So, and I see my signal is messing up, but so that leads me into my next topic of confronting Black male privilege. And then that leads me into the big patriarchy portion. So don't worry, we can't have a feminism discussion without discussing the patriarchy. But for me, I have to deal with the layers. And I think, and so Black masculinity can be embraced as ambiguous and complex and evolving in a way that goes against mainstream narratives and negative stereotypes. This leads me to the question I readily ask myself, and other feminists and other people who identify, that want to be identified as womanists, and I'm still trying to understand the difference and how womanism doesn't create a space for non-binary and trans people, but I don't know. I'm still working on that. But how do you smash the patriarchy within yourself? Right? Because like, what have you had to undo? Because we all know that we're conditioned into the same systems, and we all fight against racism readily, the panelists and also some of our participants. And also we know, and it has been brought up plenty of times, that, you know, capitalism is the thing and patriarchy is the tool. And so how do you all work directly to undo the patriarchy within yourselves? And do you have any tips for other people, other queer people, to undo patriarchy within themselves? And Farron, you were talking last, so I'm throwing it to you.
Yes, I really like this question. I think one of the that I undo patriarchy, I mean, I think it feels like this is like a two-sided thing I'm about to say. But I was raised by a Black single mom. And so I feel like inherently I came into the analysis of like the only way we get free is by smashing patriarchy. And also I do see how some people come from a similar background and make the decision, well, I'm going to be partnered with someone who is, you know, masculine or a man so that I don't have to live this experience that like I grew up in. So I can see how as two sides of the same coin there. But I say that to say, for me, how I smash patriarchy is almost every person who is in my corner is a Black woman or a Black gender nonconforming queer trans person. And the reason why I think that is so important to name is because patriarchy will have us believe that we need men. And I just want to be very clear in this moment, because I know if someone were to listen to this, they'd be like, this is why lesbianism and, you know, all of these things, they're tearing us apart because the Black man is not needed. Like I can hear that already, that narrative, and that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that I think it is very important to realize at the core of how I move, I'm not moving until I talk to other Black women, gender nonconforming folks, queer folks, because their analysis and their framework are often expansive and in depth, the way in which men haven't. And the reason why is because, right, they still benefit from patriarchy, even though they're Black. If you talk to Black men, often they're like, we're the most oppressed ever. You don't know about our pain and sorrow. And they want to give you a whole, like, and so, right, acknowledging that, yes, Black men have like experienced racism, and also Black women experience racism, sexism, patriarchy, classism, homophobia, all of the things. And so for me, basis is making sure that I'm actually talking to the people who are the most impacted, because we often have the solution. And that's in like any marginalized community, I feel like. I felt like there was a two-part to that. Oh, and the tips. And so the tips that I think I would just say to folks is like, look around look around who's in your crew. And also the other thing is, because you could internalize patriarchy. You know, I know some lesbian folks, some studs out here, you're like, oh, you just swimming in it, right? And some like, you know, feminine folks who are like committed to it, like, yep, I only bring my stud baby a plate every day. You know, so I say that to say like there's ways in which we internalize patriarchy. And so I think the other part is like we have to create spaces where we feel safe to unpack and examine things and figure out which one we're keeping and committing to and which one we're no longer committing to. And so for me, a lot of that has been figuring out who's willing to do that work with me. You know, I don't like to tell this story, but I think it's important. So, you know, one of my best friends, we've been best friends I've known this person since 7th grade. We've been best friends since my senior year of high school. And so when the whole Chris Brown and Rihanna thing came out, me and my mom at one point were talking about it. I was like, yeah, Rihanna must have did something. No man is gonna make, you know, no man is just gonna go off for and beat you like that. She must have did something. And my best friend was there like, Farron, what did you just say? I was like, Rihanna must have did something, you know? Yeah, it's definitely her fault. And that was my train of thought, like when I was 18 or whenever that thing happened. Now being 29 and doing the work that I had to do to get here, I would never say that a woman had to do something in order to, like, right, I wouldn't justify the abuse that a woman, like, or a femme or a, you know, a GNC person or a trans person endured, and not asking the man to take accountability. But I use that example because I think sometimes we think that like, oh, Farron out here woke and just got here automatically. No, I was actually also problematic and I actually had to do work. And also my friend made an active choice to still commit to me in that moment and showing what it means to like be in the work together. And so I say that to say, I want to make sure I'm not saying like we put the emotional labor on our friends to teach us, but I also think there's something around giving grace and understanding that we have to look at the material or the ways in which we've been brought up. So part of that tool is finding people to do work. As a fat body person, I have to do my work constantly of making sure I'm not fat phobic because it's everywhere. Patriarchy is everywhere. So you really have to do the work. Now, you know, like and so I think that I bring that example into the space and saying like, it took me studying feminism. It took me understanding violence and the history of it and how, you know, women have always been on the receiving benefit of that, and gender nonconforming folks and trans folks. And it also took me realizing that how the media was portraying it was that Rihanna asked for it somehow, right? Like I had to do all of that work and unpacking, and it took time. And I'm also grateful that my friend is still my friend to this day. And hanging, and also she had every choice that didn't.
Our beautiful Black men. You just gotta love Black men. You can't always trust them, but you gotta love them. And I think about, you know, as you're setting this question up, talking about patriarchy, I think you might have even said the term smash the patriarchy. And I think that one thing that we need to do before we even step into that arena is to truly define what we believe and understand and know patriarchy to be. And then really think about what it is that we're trying to do. So if we look at places where we think that, you know, when respectability politics got in with the civil rights movement, where places where people screwed up, oh, they weren't trying to change and create a more beautiful society. They're just trying to figure out how to get what they saw white people having. So like, if I can get that house and that car and that job and go on those vacations, then I'll have made it. So forget that we're like leaving everyone out, and forget that we're setting up an unequal society. I want what they got. So as we're trying to smash the patriarchy and thinking a little bit of that womanist thing, do we want to smash the patriarchy and then replace it with a matriarchy? Because we're still then preferencing a group of people and their thoughts and ideas over other folks. And I will tell you that as a woman, I kind of think that we come up with great ideas, but I really don't think that as we're trying to smash the patriarchy, that we're going to move into a liberated society if then women are in charge and they just tell everyone what to do and don't listen to anyone else. So personally, I think that we should be working towards some type of an egalitarian society with an understanding that our men, and just like you, Farron, as you're like, geez, how is this going to be interpreted? How is this going to be interpreted? That our men in many ways are ignorant and have been allowed for generations to not step into this arena of how do we create space for all. Again, like, you know, I'm the Black man, I'm the most oppressed. No, you're not. Pull it out. It's completely different. It's flipped. In the white world, the men have the most power. In our world, I'm sorry, but they were so scared of you and your strength. They gave me the degrees. They gave me the ability to step into their world. So you don't have that. And so I think when we think about our men and what they're dealing with and how to kind of pull them along with us, what does it mean to be a Black man, and what is a Black man's strength? Not what is he allowed to do, not what does society give him props for, but what is the true nature of a Black man's strength? And then how do we create space for that? And do we want to have space for that? Because very often in these conversations, we're not talking about the essence of a human being. We're talking about outside behaviors that have been assigned to them, that so many of them from birth decide to take on, you know, whether it's because they're raised in a family with a single mom and mom assigns all this man stuff to them, or because they're watching Saturday morning cartoons and that's what it is, or because their father, who's a man in the society and doesn't have what the society calls success and strength, a Black man. So I don't think and we are living in such reaction to the dominant culture that I think that there's a lot of real foundational work. And again, not trying to take any of the work off of our men, but what do we see as that beautiful ideal Black man? And what needs to go into creating that? Because I can tell one of a generation of single Black mothers who were not gonna raise assholes. And I can tell you that my oldest son has a whole lot of that man asshole in him. So you're talking to someone, you're dealing with someone who consciously brought him to all of the feminist events, brought him to all of the lesbian events. In his world when he was young, there were, you know, so there's the butches, and butches can do a whole lot of great work. And then the and going back to that weird thing, the way we conference called Butch Go or New York. And one year I went to the New York conference, and there was a panel of, if it was a space of Black women talking about how they took care of Black men, the room would have erupted, because they're all talking about, you know, bringing him his plate, her bringing her plate, but this, all of this really in Black queer space, you have seen the gender line. And you've seen how we play out the most sick parts of what we consider a heterosexual culture in our space, but don't question it because it's women with women.
Thank you, Kamora. I had to switch over to my other audio, y'all. I apologize. Ashleigh, I'm about to ask you the same question. And again, I want to remind us that patriarchy is upheld through the social construction of masculinity and femininity, and it is a tool of mass control for behaviors. As such, Ashleigh, how do you smash the patriarchy within yourself? And also, do you have any tips or tools for people so that we can also smash the patriarchy within ourselves?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Ala. Of course. You know, it was an interesting life. Well, growing up as a kid, as a child, with two parents who were in law enforcement, and also growing up in church and seeing that power, patriarchy, and white supremacy all go hand in hand. And understanding that now in my adult life as a Black queer woman, Black queer feminist, of how much control it had over even my own personal life. You know, I was a result of that. You know, I'm that Black powerful man who came from the hood. I'm going to get my family out the hood. And I respect for life. I respect my father for that. But also what it showed me was if you didn't play along with that lifestyle and you weren't this straight woman, you weren't, you know, this go to school, go to college, you know, get a specific type of job, you know, have a specific career and make a specific amount of money, you disappointed that patriarch, you disappointed your father, you disappointed that male in your life. And so a lot of it came down on me as a Black queer woman, because I realized there was no power in their eye, in his eyes, or in my parents' eyes, if I didn't have a man by my side, if I didn't have a male partner, if I wasn't being taken care of by a man, if he wasn't bringing, you know, the money home and I was, you know, being Susie Homemaker. And we have to realize that a lot of our patriarchy and us not smashing it, we don't realize that it's been taught to us, just like the food we eat, just like the thoughts we have, the self-care tactics we have. It's been taught to us. It's generational. You know, a lot of being a queer woman and growing up with friends who were not gay, who were not queer, I realized I didn't smash patriarchy when I was young. I just kind of confided and well, I just kind of was content with my friends, and it was okay that I was the only gay woman. It was okay that my friends didn't understand that I was gay and that I was never going to be with a man, and I was a little different. It was okay that you know, we weren't really seen as equal. And that's what I accepted as a child and accepted just growing up. So what I realized is that, you know, that is how I had to smash it, was not accepting that behavior, not accepting that allowance to have people separate me or put me in a box like I'm different, or that my relationships are different, or that the jobs I do are different. I have a degree, I have a bachelor's degree I worked hard for. And I'm a Black educated queer woman. So there's a lot of things that come with me that with patriarchy, they just see you as a Black woman who is confused or doesn't know their background or must have been sexually assaulted or, you know, has mental health issues or a list of things that instead of me just being born this way and having a gift and a power without being a male. And yeah, that's pretty much how I smash it, just being myself. And that's what I do. I tell the youth, I tell everyone, I tell those who are struggling, be yourself. That's how you're going to smash the patriarchy, because it's power, it's control. And the way you control people is not letting them be who they are. And that's how I think we should smash it more.
I will also add, thank you, Kamora and Ashleigh, for talking about heteronormativity. I think as a queer person, I think one of the ways in which we also perpetuate, patriarchy is trying to adhere or adform to heteronormative behaviors that we think will keep us safe. And so, you know, when I mentioned that example of talking, you know, a friend of mine who, you know, was like, I only date femmes, right? And they're masculine, you know, non-binary. I think that's the work. Again, that's the work, is examining the ways in which we try to bring that heteronormativity into these queer relationships. Because when we try to bring an oppressive system into our relationship, right, it's already, if that's going to be our foundation of how we're going to relate to each other, then already it's not going to work. Unless we're both truly committed to that system and we refuse to see anything else. And so I also just wanted to name, I think that's also one of the ways in which, like, as a queer person who dates queer folks, that is the work. And, you know, I like to say queer, but just being in this moment really clear around what I mean when I say queer, I like to say lesbian adjacent. So dating like women, gender nonconforming, and trans folks. We often, when we're in relation to each other, have to think about the ways like, oh, is this a moment of heteronormativity coming into this relationship? Oh, okay, let's unpack this real quick, because it's a real slippery slope. It could be, you know, I love to cook and, you know, care for people. And also people make a lot of assumptions based off of my presentation. And so I say that to say, I think also one of the ways in which we smash patriarchy, yes, is by being ourselves. And also making sure that we're constantly examining heteronormativity and if that is seeping into our relationship, with whether it's platonic or intimate, but just like looking at that.
Yes, thank you. I was trying to unmute myself on the computer and I forgot I'm back on the phone again. And actually, Farron, thank you, because the segue that I was going to segue into is a further examination of the patriarchy within ourselves. I am a believer of holistic approaches to healing work, and like, Farron, you did a really great job. I was trying to make sure that I didn't say Octavia Butler and Audre Lorde every 15 seconds during this discussion, because those are whose shoulders I stand on when I look for outside people to teach me Black feminism, because my mother is a feminist, but I struggle with her approach to Black feminism because it is highly holds on to heteronormativity, and it holds on to like this, the only narrative that Black men are like, we have to protect Black men at all costs. And having a Black man who is 16 years old, we have what I call the fuck nigga speech at least once a week, where you are not going to be that. And that looks like this. So when him and his friends are having these amazing gaming things, we had a whole thing about like, why are you saying that person's a bitch? Like, what are you saying is a bitch? And then we had the pussy conversation, because they were, oh, you're a pussy. And I made them all, as we're on Xbox One, and they think it's funny because I do it in a way, one, I've always been doing it, and I try to like make a joke out of it, so it's not like I'm so hard and so I'm like, well, why did you say I can't do this work in the community and not do this work at home? And so there's things that I'll realize like as we're having a discussion and I'm like, oh, actually that's not right now that I think about it. And little itty bitty conversations that on the big scheme of organizing and the work that we do may seem smaller, but I realize that those are the things that matter to him more and teach him how to actively do those things that I've been telling him, like, you can't be patriarchal, you can't be a fuck nigga. Like, what does that mean? Oh, you just saw me struggling. You just saw a person, it doesn't matter who they are, struggling to do something. You're supposed to get up and go and ask them and take care of your community. It's not about what gender that person is. It's about, this is a person that lives on the street. Like, this is your community. And that's why you're not going to be. And I think like that's where how you smash the patriarchy as well, as you directly connect how we are a unit and we work together. And there's no one cog that's better than the other cogs. Because for Black men, they are very stepped on. But the only people in the world, I think, that are more stepped on than Black men are Black trans women. So there's that, like the intersectionality of that identity. I think of that when I think of patriarchy. And so what gifts, my next question for you all are, what gifts have you found that you have given yourself since you have been actively smashing the patriarchy? What greatness has that allowed for you? And how has that allowed you to win in your life and create a holistic approach of love for yourselves? Wait, wrong thing. And Ashleigh, since
Yeah.
answer. Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, for me, being able to connect on a level of spirituality versus religion, on spirituality, I would say, for example, with the males in my life, being able to connect on a sense of healing for generations is also another way, as a gift that I feel like I have based off of my experiences as a Black queer woman, again, based off of our traumas, able to just bring those two, spirituality and healing, to connect us for, for many reasons. And I think that has nothing to do with me being exactly a Black woman, but it has to do with just me being Black and knowing my culture and knowing my ancestral and knowing the gifts that were given to me in my bloodline, and taking out the patriarchy and understand that as Black people, we have natural gifts, natural healing gifts, and being able to talk to other men and other Black queer women about that, I think is definitely a strong power and effective, especially being in social justice and in a community where healing is needed daily. So that's definitely a power I think I put forth every day.
Farron, I'm gonna ask you, and I know I want to honor everyone's time because it's 5 o'clock and this conversation is really dope and amazing, and we're gonna be ending soon. It's so dope that the time just flew by. Farron, can you answer that question? What gifts has smashing the patriarchy allowed for you?
Community. It has allowed for me to invest in serious relationships with people, specifically Black, queer, gender non-conforming folks. It has allowed for beautiful relationships to emerge.
Thank you, Farron. Kamora?
Yeah, I'd have to say that in some ways, to be completely honest, Black women who adhere to the patriarchy have made my life a little bit easier, because you walk into a space with a whole lot of Black men, and definitely me, I can be much more feminine presenting most of the time. Once I open my mouth, it changes. But I can walk into a space looking fairly feminine presenting, and they know how to put women in their place. They know what to say, they know how to say it, they know how to run it. And I refuse to be a part of that. And not even, I'm not even in reaction to it anymore, because it's not that I don't know how to be a part of it, but I'm freaking amazing. I'm pretty awesome. I think anyone who's ever shared space with me knows that that's how I enter the space. And that, yes, and that is who is in the space. So the superpower is when the Black man goes, oh, come on, sis. No, we're not doing it like that. That is not at all what's happening right here. You're gonna meet me as a human being, and if you can't, you can go. That gives me an advantage every time. It's not fair. It is using folks. It's manipulating a situation, but they know how Black women are supposed to act. They know, my generation definitely knows how to wink and smile. And Kamora is just, so my superpower is identifying and not doing that. And then going back to that place of spirituality, where coming into who I am as a person who, I love my Orishas, I love where they come from, and I love that depending on what's necessary in the moment, I can show up with feminine energy, female energy, I can show up with masculine energy, and that all of this dwells within me. So there's that beautiful place where, no, dude, I think you're missing all of this. Feminine is where it's at, masculine is where it's at, and it's all here as it's necessary. And that is a wonderful way to, as I was talking about, you know, I don't want a matriarchy, because I don't want to stand oppressing any other group of people. And that comes from smashing the patriarchy. Well, if we get rid of the patriarchy, then women can be in charge? No. But smashing the patriarchy, that superhero, that superpower was, but then how do we take it all? And how do we use all of it together and take the good of what the good is, leave out the not so good, and then make it all work? But my spirituality is a big place where I've learned how to dwell within and use all, and again, not being ashamed. So when I came out as a lesbian in the late 80s, there were lipstick lesbians, and there's this weird idea that the way you looked was how you were going to behave. So if you look like this, you're gonna be very, very girly. And if you don't look like this, you're gonna be super, super masculine. And I've got all this masculine energy inside of me that made showing up in spaces just uncomfortable, which created the place to have to smash the patriarchy inside of myself and then figure out what was actually gonna show up. And that was the place, that's the superhero power of figuring out what actually dwells within you and how it shows up. Fuck the body parts, fuck the presentation, what's really up in here.
Thank you for that. That was freaking awesome. And like, this is like the perfect way to end our thing. And we probably need to do this again. The one question I would ask you all to close out with, and Farron, I'm going to open up with you because I know you have to go soon.
Wait, did Ashleigh answer that question?
Ashleigh, did you answer? Yeah,
oh.
I thought so. I was like, oh, wait.
Yeah, I answered first. Remember, I jumped on it.
Okay. Good.
Thanks. Good looking out, sis. Good looking out, Farron.
I thought so because I've been trying to keep notes, but I was like, dag. All right. The one question from our audience is from Autumn. Can you speak to the tools that you have used for resiliency? And to maybe specify that with something that you can share with young queer Black people. One of your tools for resiliency. Kamora got her book, Homegirls. Farron?
Yeah, I feel like I'm saying the same answer for multiple questions, but community. I would not be here standing today if it wasn't for community. Really getting really clear around who are your people, who's gonna hold you in the good, bad, and the ugly, right? That is really important. And getting really clear around that. I think some new material, you don't even have to read the whole book. It's from Pleasure Activism and Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. she has this piece called Liberated Relationships. It's literally like 4 pages. And in that, she just talks about what it means to be in practice with a person, platonic or intimate, or with folks, and rooting liberation at the like core of that, and what it means to say, hey, can we practice actually being in a liberated relationship with each other? And one of that things is like actually practicing telling no lies. Ooh, being vulnerable. Ooh, what? You got to spirit. I'm having fear come up for me right now, and I have to actually name that in this conversation. I can't just roll my eyes and just be like, you annoying? Ooh, right? Like, and so I say that to say, for me, it's actually just been having relationships where I could bring my full self, which means problematic, not knowing, scared, vulnerable, and vulnerable in a good way, like Brene Brown vulnerable. So vulnerable, like, I'm not sure, I don't know if I'm gonna do this right, but I'm gonna get in the arena and try this thing anyway. And also I might fail, and that's okay, right? Because my humanity is not connected, or my dignity is not connected to if I do this thing well or not. And so I say that to say, what has been really, again, at the root of everything for me is community, and making sure I have relationships that are like truly deep. I'm also a farmer. And so one of the things that I like to tell people is, you know, lettuce, they grow at the top of the soil. They're just right there. Whereas, so I don't want a relationship like a lettuce. I want a relationship that's deep like a potato or like a carrot, where the carrot is actually all the way down and you have to pull it up. Like, you really want those deep relationships. If you have a very shallow relationship and the only thing you could do is, I don't know, just, hey, how are you? I'm good. Oh, okay, cute. Did you see this meme? If that's all you can do, those relationships are important and they serve a purpose. I'm not like trying to be dismissive of that, but you have to have relationships where you can feel held, cradled, where your inner child could come out, where you could get soothed when you can't soothe yourself. And so I'm gonna stop there, because at the end of what I'm saying is, it's relationships, it's the people. Who are your people when this shit hit the fan?
Yes. Kamora, Ashleigh, who would like to go next? What are your tools for resiliency?
I would just say, for me, if it's okay, just quickly, being, of course, like Farron said, authentically yourself always, no matter what. And also spending time alone. I think I had to spend a lot of time alone, undoing and unpacking and relearning and reteaching, and really knowing myself before I'm able to go out into the community and lead and guide others to do this work and to be themselves and to lead, you know, with the true resiliency of just going against, you know, patriarchy and going against what society has said that who we are as Black queer women. And so, yeah, just truly authentically being myself and spending time alone. And I think that's something that I didn't do a lot as a youth. I didn't spend a lot of time alone. I didn't take the time to understand the power I was going to have as an adult and growing into my Black queer feminism. And of course, relying on community and making sure the right people are around you are important. But once you get around those people, keep studying yourself and keep learning and growing and wanting to build that character. And what I did learn a lot from the men in my life, I wanted to say before, is checking our egos and making sure that our egos are quiet, and making sure that we're listening to the community around us, listening to the people who do care about us, and constantly growing and checking ourselves.
Yeah, I'd have to say that sometimes focusing on the ridiculousness of it all, because this is heavy work, that it all can get really, really heavy, and we all screw up at times. So there's definitely the forgiving yourself for the screw ups, but also just laughing at the ridiculousness of the screw ups. This is what it's going to be nonstop forever. So the tool I have is self-reflection and laughing at myself. But then also I have been blessed with having these older Black lesbian women who love me and have no problem calling me out on my shit. So I'm thinking about like Michelle Brown. She's from Detroit. She was very influential in creating the Ruth Ellis House, but she was also a Black single mother of a son. And Karen Williams, who is, if you don't know the Ha Ha Institute, she's out in Ohio, older Black lesbian who has been on the lesbian comedy circuit since there was a lesbian comedy circuit, and was the Black lesbian raising son. So when I talk about the majority of us as parents being below the Mason-Dixon line, I'm thinking of like working with those women and meeting with them at the NBJC. And my child was still in elementary school. And at that time, like, dude, he was the best lesbian you've ever met in your life. But I've got older women who I love, and they're there in my corner, and their sons are 18 and 20 years old, and boom, they're misogynistic as heck. But on top of it, here I am as a lesbian, and I thought I was, helping my son out. Instead, I just gave him pointers that allowed him to get in and ruin women's lives even worse, right? So having those women to lean on when it's time to lean on them, and those women we are Black lesbian, and she's going to be doing some of the same work. So we're going to talk to her, not in that nice way that white folks do. Oh, what you're doing is so great, but that come here because we heard you talk and we need to talk to you. But that is a tool. I depend on those women, and if I need them and don't know I need them, they get in touch with me and tell me that I need them. So I've got that built in. And then looking at just Ida B. Wells and Zora Neale Hurston, and I love the two of them because during their time, Black men hated them. The mainstream hated them. Zora Neale Hurston sat up and predicted what was going to happen with desegregation. Exactly what was going to happen. And when she was saying that, she was ridiculed, she was laughed at, she was blackballed, and not given any respect. So when it comes down to it, and I need to like build myself up and give myself that spiritual food, I might end up just watching a video with Karen. I might try to check in with them. I'm going to listen to some Prince, and I'm going to realize that the women before me who actually created change were ridiculed during their time.
And I forgot to unpress the mute button. So I just want to honor Ashleigh, Kamora, and Farron, and really thank y'all for sharing your lived experience with us and being vulnerable with us. I think we know this conversation of Black queer feminism, we just only slightly touched the surface. But I want to give y'all a chance to plug y'all work. However anyone can get in touch with y'all, please visually share. We'll go with you. We'll go with Farron because I know you have to clock off, Farron, and then Ashleigh and Kamora. Share your stuff, and I will also share. We will also make sure we share it on Facebook as well.
Yes, you can go to my website. I know Orisha is going to hand that information out. Also, you can reach out to me on Instagram. My Instagram is the book of _Farron. And again, I know Orisha is going to hand this information out. Yeah, those are the best ways to get in contact with me. Thank you so much for having me, Orisha.
Thank you, Farron, so much. Ashleigh?
Okay, so the best ways to get in contact with me, Instagram, Styled Different. That's STYLED Different. You can also look me up on Facebook. Empath Vintage is the name of my business. And if you Google Empath Vintage, you'll also find a way to get to the Facebook page. And then empathvintage@gmail.com for all ideas, questions, booking for clothing swaps or pop-up shops. Or even if you want to just come by and take a look at the inventory, I'm here to do that at any time as well. And yeah, I'm around. And thank you again, Ala and Pride Center.
Thank you, Ashleigh. Kamora.
Okay, well, there's the website, www.kamorasculturalcorner.com. And that's really a great place to go if you're looking to book me for trainings and such. So the trainings, again, all come from a Black, queer, Afrocentric perspective. My trainings deal with cultural humility, which is kind of like, as we were talking earlier, like know yourself so that you can be there with other people, so that you can be there for other people. So I do workshops, I do classes, Right now, I'm doing a lot of one-on-one consultations because that beautiful place where we're nice to each other and think that we've got it. Now that folks are quarantined with folks, we're working through that. So you can definitely book us through the website. Instagram is called Kamora's Cultural Corner. That's really just telling you about events and such that we're doing. And then the Facebook page is a place where you get and ask Kamora. So every Wednesday night we do a community conversation, and the topics are whatever anyone wants to talk about. So if you'd like to host a conversation or be a part of a conversation, either show up or get in touch with me beforehand and we can do that. But we are clearly sitting at the intersection of me and me.
Thank you so much, Farron. We see you walking. You're so cute. Farron is so cute. Yo. She was like, for joining us on this Sunday. Our New Haven Pride Center, and we were also posted on the Black Lives Matter New Haven page as well. If you want to reach out to me, Allah, you can always reach me at youth@newhavenpridecenter.org, or you can always email info@newhavenpridecenter.org. So again, thank y'all. You have a good night.
Peace, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening.